Calling this meeting to order, Monday, February 12th, 6 p.m. Please join me for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence. All right, thank you. This is an open meeting and it has been posted. Terry, can you do roll call, please?
Crosby Buchenhagen.
Here.
Erica Connor.
Here.
Jake Heckenthal.
Here.
Gail Lesage. Here. Dale Porter.
Here.
Vito Schwartz.
Here.
Carolyn Simon.
Here.
Greg Wirtz.
Here.
Gary Winchowski here.
All right, we have presentations, but we are going to move some things around here. We have
We have the Vosberg family with us tonight to discuss the detachment. So, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, could we go out of order and have the detachment discussion first?
yes.
Thank you. So we'll invite the Vosberg family up to the microphone here. In your packet, you had a summary of the territory detachment and kind of the timeline as to what has transpired so far. So the small territory transfer proposal went to the Palmyra Eagles School District last Tuesday, the February 6th. The district denied their petition. That is on then up for discussion for us this evening. And then we would have the resolutions for the 26th at the board meeting for either approval by the board or denial by the board. So this evening we have Mr. Vosberg with us, and he has an opportunity to present his position on it. And board, if you have any questions, you may ask him as it pertains only to the detachment request.
Hi, Jake Vosberg. So we moved here. Sorry about that. So we moved to the area 8 years ago. We were expecting our first Wyatt, and when we moved in, Art Schneider, most of you probably know him, was our realtor. And he had told us, hey, don't worry about it. We can do open enrollment for your kids. We're pregnant with Wyatt. So we're like, okay, great. And that went fine. And we're very, very pleased with Mukwonago, especially in contrast to Palmyra Eagles School District. But then, we had Oliver, and he has Down syndrome. And it's very difficult to open enroll, and we understand there's a lot of budget issues and stuff like that in regards to having a kid with special needs open enroll to a school district. So currently he is attending Eagle Elementary, and we have pretty much reached a decision to, not continue going there anymore. We're even contemplating selling our property if need be to do that. However, we really don't want to. Financially, it would be troublesome, it would be a burden, and it would definitely displease the kids. So I guess all that said, that's kind of the picture in a nutshell. But yeah, Wyatt is attending Prairie View, and he loves it. And we're very, very happy with Mukwonago School District and that school in particular. So I guess that's all I have for the time being.
Anybody have any questions?
I guess my question is policy and procedure. If Palmyra Eagle already denied it and we were, let's say, to approve it, it's still just dead in the water, is it not?
There would open the Vosberg family up to an appeal to the state boundary boards, and then there would be a process that the family would go through in order to get the hearing heard in Madison. And there would be a panel of school board members from around the state, one from a small school district, one from a medium-sized school district, one from a large school district. They would then hear the testimony in the case and then would make a final decision if the detachment were approved or not.
Do we have any guess how long that appeals process even takes?
Usually it takes, having been part of them in the past, usually that case is being heard sometime April or May.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
So we will have resolutions prepared for the board to consider at the February 26th meeting. And then that will follow the statutory requirement and ensure that the statutory questions are answered. And then at the 26th meeting, at a regular board meeting, you can vote to either approve or deny the request. Any other questions for me on this? Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any citizens' comments?
No.
No citizens' comments tonight. Moving on to consent agenda. Looking for the approval of school board meeting minutes of January 29, 2024. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, it is approved by consent. Moving on to, we don't have any recognitions. Moving on to policies. Do we have any policies? None.
We do not have any this evening.
Okay. Moving on to personnel topics. Hiring process for MHS principal.
All right, so Stephanie is getting up what was attached for you. I'm just going to talk through our process for hiring the Mukwonago High School principal. We've got an extensive search going on right now, and just again, this is a really important position in our system. So I wanted to talk to you about what this looks like. We have a posting currently up on WeCan that is the state's platform for all administrative and teacher hires. That is open from February 7th through February 21st. And again, thanks, Stephanie. We will actively recruit during that time as well. This week, we are collecting feedback from multiple stakeholder groups around the desired qualities, attributes that we're seeking in the future principal. So we're talking to high school staff. We have already administered a survey to parents where we've asked them for those attributes. February 21st through March 5th, that's when we'll begin the actual interview process. We'll start with a video screener. So we have purchased a tool called SparkHire. We'll be using that not only with our administrators, but also with certified staff moving forward. And that's just a first kind of look at the candidates. We ask pretty generic questions to just try and get a feel for who these candidates are. And then the first round of interviews will be done with our executive cabinet, which is the superintendent and then the director team. From there, we will move candidates down to the second round, which will be with the building team, which will be a team of teachers, administration, as well as a parent representative. On March 11th, and these dates are as we're hoping to stick as closely to this timeline as possible. March 11th is when we tentatively have then the next step in the process, which is a student meeting and a high school tour. So we're looking at our candidates. This would be the final two to conduct a Q&A with our student representatives and then do a building tour. And we're looking to collect a panel of juniors to be those student representatives, as they're the kids who are going to have to live with this principal going forward. And then on March 12th, our final candidate will have an interview with Dr. Cook, the superintendent, and provided they are recommended, would meet with me to formulate contract. And then looking at March 18th, that board meeting, that we would bring that recommendation of the candidate to you. So again, a pretty, I would say, extensive process to make sure that we're bringing the right candidate in front of you for a recommendation to fill this, again, incredibly important position. Questions for me about the process?
No? Thank you. Cherry?
Is this a normal timeline?
This is, in terms of a timeline, yeah. I mean, the timeline we've kind of tried to outline in conjunction with our process, and I would say the process is pretty typical for a position like this.
Being that it's this time of year, would there be other candidates that by later in the year would be looking for a job? You know what, I'm just curious, as I know when we were looking for superintendent, it depends upon the time of year when the candidates are out. So I just didn't know if this was like.
This is a prime timeline for hiring of administrators. Right now is definitely,
Okay.
yes, prime time.
Carolyn?
Can you share how many applications we've received so far, or do we hold that number?
We typically hold that number until, I believe, the end, just for purposes of candidates who are still applying. Yeah, but we can share that information probably in a closed session.
Some positives around the pool right now, and we do have some numbers in the pool, but we are getting a lot of calls from principals, assistant principals, and directors from the area who are giving us names of individuals who have a good reputation in other systems and are ready for the step up. So for a candidate to come through, unless they're actively searching, their letters of recommendation, their resumes, that's taken some time. When we posted last Thursday.
Wednesday.
Yeah, so I mean, we're 4 days into the posting, and people have to work on that. So by the end of this week, we'll start to have a much broader pool.
Any other questions? Thank you. Moving on to wages for student workers.
Sure. So this came up. We hired a new PAC manager, and in doing so, he brought to my attention that he was paying his student workers an hourly compensation of $7.50, and that became problematic for him as he was having a hard time filling these positions. He really came to the table to advocate for them based on what it is that they were doing, that we look at an increase of their hourly wage. I then looked at what is the hourly compensation for all of our other student employee groups. So we hire them for buildings and ground positions as well as summer school paraprofessionals. And they are paid anywhere from $13.50 to $15 and up. And so we had a conversation at Executive Cabinet, and in looking at the job responsibilities and looking at what this looks like comparable in the field if they were to do this, we are recommending an increase to $13.50 for this position for our student employees.
Would that include our camera crew that isn't here tonight?
This would include our camera crew who is not here tonight. Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to student learning topics. Extended field trip, MHS SAVE.
So it is part of our board policy that if a staff member is going to take students for any kind of field trip out of state and overnight, that the board does need to approve that. So this is the first time since a few of you have been on the board, I think this used to go to Student Learning Committee, that we're going ahead and do this. And I have two tonight. The first one is for the National Save Promise Club Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this would be 3 students and 2 staff members. The reason that there's 2 staff members going with 3 students is because Kylie Rich, who you all know, is actually on the council for SAVE, the National Council, and she needs to go down a day early because she is on that council, and the other 2 students will still go to school Friday morning, I believe, and then fly out for the weekend for the activities. So do you have any questions?
These are all self-funded?
This one is paid for self-funded, and then the conference registration paid for by MHS SAFE and money that they've made over time.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay. The second then one is a request to take a group of high school students to Europe. The district has done trips like this before. This proposed trip was given by Carlos Romo and Kathleen Casio. They are social studies teachers up at the high school, for a group of sophomores and juniors to go to London, Paris, and Amsterdam the summer of 2025. Questions on this?
I have a couple questions. I don't have it in front of me because my board docs is
Yeah,
in a meltdown right now.
Yeah,
Something-
Laura did just step out to give board docs a call to see what technical issue was
Okay.
going on.
Mine's working on
I believe
You're pulling all the power over there. Vika.
it's because you were able to log in.
Yep.
I had a couple of questions regarding the kind of safety aspect of this. I noticed in there they said that they were going to tape the door shut. I just think, one, I think that's it's an interesting tactic. I understand the reason behind it, but at some point, these kids have to be responsible for themselves. So I think that's a little bit of a step too far. But one of the other things that I did not see on there was they will be traveling to a place where there is a different drinking age, drugs are legal. So what policies are going to follow them as they go on this trip?
So there is something in our rules of conduct for an extended field trip that talks about the use of alcoholic beverages, marijuana, chemical controlled substances being prohibited. There is a list of, so it doesn't matter what the drinking age is in that country, it is prohibited according to our policies.
Okay. And then the only other thing I saw on there was that I believe they were asking for funds.
Yeah, I actually did ask them about that too, because I saw that in there. They said they decided at the last minute to put that in there if there was any group that wanted to give money, but they do expect the trip to be self-funded.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not in favor of the district providing any sort of funding for that. I think that should be self-funded with fundraisers.
So just a comment off of that, I believe part of the understanding is that no seniors will be allowed on this trip because of the drinking age, because they'd be 18. So it would be sophomore and juniors of that year for that very reason. And the tape thing has worked very, very well in middle school band trips. It's not that they're taping in the door, it's that you can put tape on the door to know if students came out at night. So it's more of like you did what you weren't supposed to do.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't be sending my child if I didn't think those chaperones weren't keeping a very close eye on my child in Europe.
Right.
And I'd actually be fine if they taped the door shut. But this is just to know if they followed the rules, because we do have consequences and policies that would follow them.
Yeah, there's ways around that though. I mean, it would be pretty easy to game that system. So, I mean, I've chaperoned a high school trip to Europe too, so I understand. But I think tape on the door is a step too far. And the kids have to be held accountable at some point. They have to be responsible for themselves. So.
How
Dr.
could they be
Cook?
held accountable if they didn't know?
Stephanie, and I apologize, I'm not able to get into my board docs. What is the cancellation language? And then what are the thresholds that the travel company would be using should the state of the world get to a place where it wasn't safe to send kids? The only reason I ask that is I've been on the district decision-making end of increases in terrorism, post-terrorist attack, and then we're all familiar with any trips that were planned in and around COVID and the issues that students and families had with travel companies during that time.
So I see here, if you cancel your trip for any reason not otherwise covered by this policy, we will reimburse for 75% of the non-refundable cancellation fees. That is in there. I'm just looking through for anything because of safety.
I'm sorry, did you say the district would be responsible for 75%?
No, the parents who paid for the trip would be.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what I can see right now. I might need to check in more to the information that they got.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, say there is something that happens overseas and travel company says it's still okay, but parents are freaking out, don't want to go. Then we're running into a situation of refunds. Do we make it clear it's on them?
Yes, in the past we have done that also. Yeah.
Okay.
I think in the past there was optional additional travel insurance because we had a group of students that were supposed to go to Cuba and terrorism things shut it down. And we had to make the decision as a board. We're like, it's like threat yellow. We're not allowing them to go. Like they didn't even then have the option because it's district sponsored to still go. We said, no, you're not allowed to go. We're not sponsoring this anymore. So I think they were made aware ahead of time that they'd be wise to get additional insurance just in case.
Carolyn?
What is the qualification for students to earn a trip like this? Is it just any student, is it sophomore and junior, or do they have to take certain classes?
No, for this trip, they would be looking to have a general meeting, parents and students who are interested in attending.
Are we capping it at 50?
Yes.
Is it lottery? I'm sorry.
being
Hammer ya. Is
You're
it
good.
lottery then after that?
It would be first come, first serve.
It's being capped
Crosby?
at 50, or it says 50 plus.
I thought they were gonna cap it at 50, but I would have to ask that of them. I thought they were gonna cap it at 50.
And
But I do see it says at least 50 students, so I would need to get clarification and get back.
is there a ratio of chaperone to student that we would have too?
Yeah, needs to be 6 to 7 chaperones
I think you
for
wanna keep it
every,
at 6, right?
yeah, for the 50 students.
Because we have the 9 listed, so, but we wouldn't bring, do we bring extra, I mean, I wouldn't care if we had more chaperones, but
If more adults would go along, then they would have to pay for the trip.
Yeah.
So that happens sometimes for sure, but
okay.
yeah. The company
Crosby?
usually covers so many chaperones and pays for their trip
Okay.
per so many students.
I think in there it said that they were going to highlight lessons that they had been learning in social studies. Do we know what lessons those are going to be that they plan on highlighting in each city?
I do not know that right now. Something else I would need to ask them.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Academic excellence.
So this is a fun one to bring to you every year. Every year, the state gives so many scholarships depending upon the size of our high school. And in this case, we get 4 academic excellence scholars and 4 technical excellence scholars. And it's required that we present those students to the board for approval by February 25th. And so this year, our academic excellence scholars, which are dictated by the highest GPA basically in the graduating class, because we have many candidates with 4.0, we then go to their ACT score. If there's a tiebreaker, which there was not this year, between 4 and 5 ACT score, then we do count the number of AP and honors classes that the students have taken. This year there was a clear 4 between the GPA and the ACT. These students, if they attend a school in-state, a participating college in-state, get $2,250 a year during the 4 years that they're in school. And our academic excellence honors this year are Parker Wilhite, Michael Sadowski, Samuel Czkowski, and Claire Wright. In addition then, there's also a technical excellence scholarship. That technical excellence scholarship is figured out by the number of students that take the most CTE concentrators or courses in the school, in addition to YA programs. When there is a tie there, we also look at GPA and ACT score. Those students can attend Wisconsin Technical College or independent tech college, and also get the $2,250 per year for the time that they're in school. And those recipients are Andrew Lubke, Aiden Schumer, William Basta, and Madison Batts.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Student service topics. RBHI Merit Solutions.
All right, so my first memo tonight is just about the Rural Behavioral Health Institute. So as all of you have been made aware and certainly have been super supportive of the district's emphasis on mental health support for our students and families. So over the past several years, we've put several different supports in place, one of them being the GALS Institute, some of the AODA pieces that we've put into place, and then also our recent addition with the Care Solace program that we've been using with our students, families, and staff. So I'm bringing you tonight the Montana Rural Behavioral Health Institute. It's a partnership with Merit Solutions, and it works to reduce suicide risk among young people. It builds a preventative network of interventions. It measures things such as depression, anxiety, and substance use. I'm bringing this forward tonight as information only to talk about the impact it's had on students in Montana and their families. And then also, this is something that Joe has had some experience with in Waukesha, and so he brings some of that knowledge with him. So I'll let him speak to that.
So yeah, so a little over a year ago, I entered into some discussions. We were looking at the number of kids, it's kind of on two levels. One, kids who were struggling with mental health needs in schools. We, at that time, had started to see a rise in, and had, I guess for a long time, seen a rise in vaping, particularly marijuana. We were seeing more, I guess, dangerous substances that were starting to enter into the discussion with the students. We also began to see kids who were at higher risk post-pandemic of the anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies, suicidal ideation. So just through some discussions, I was put in contact with a group who works in Montana and has been in place for, I think, 3 years there, where Montana has the highest risk of, the highest rate of adolescent suicide in the country. It's 4 times that of the nearest state. Montana is it's a beautiful state. It's a very wide open. I mean, it was a big sky country, right? There's a lot of ranches. There's a lot of hunting. There's just that kind of that spirit out there. But kids out there too were struggling with things. And I mean, this is the information that came from Montana. There was the lifestyle, right? It's hunting, it's ranching, it's that frontier lifestyle still in many respects. Kids had higher access to guns there. They were able to be more successful with their suicide attempt. So they began this initiative to try to screen kids early so that they could identify where anxiety, depression, suicidal tendencies lay with the students. And they partnered with a group out of Madison, Merit Solutions. Back in the 1960s, John Greist, he was a psychiatrist who worked at UW Hospital. He began to pioneer computer-based mental health screening to take away the bias that the rater, that the nurse, the healthcare provider would get when they administered the survey. What they found was high rates of reliability. So they created an app then that has the Columbia and then an anxiety screener, depression screener, and I forget their name. And they began to pilot that, and they're using that then for any clinical drug trial out there right now so that you can find out if the medicine you're taking is leading to higher rates of anxiety or depression. They started to apply this in Montana with the Rural Behavioral Health Institute to students. They partnered with some school districts. The school districts opened up the door and said, you can come in. We're going to start as an opt-in so the parents that wanted their children to participate could, actively give consent to participate. And the kids were going through the screener, and what they were finding, some interesting data, and we don't have them here tonight to speak, but in every screening, they were finding the one kid who nobody thought was struggling with anything was being identified at high risk in one of those categories. What they found over time was that kids who participated in this were getting into treatment much quicker. So the way the process works is a school counselor would be in a classroom with kids. They would have access to the screener. It would take about 10 minutes. At the end of that, about a minute later, a report would be generated identifying what level that student was at, high risk, medium risk, low risk. And then on site, they would have licensed providers who would be there to do the initial assessment for high risk students, again, with parent consent. Kids who fell in the high risk category had a median appointment. Kids who were moderate risk were seen within, or recommended to be seen within 72 hours. They would guarantee an appointment. Kids who were at low risk, they would be kids that we would just be providing information to, and that's what they did for all families, just the general information like we do with Care Solace. If you're struggling, here's some resources for you. What they found over time was, one, school districts, parents were requesting more and more for the students to participate. There were higher and higher numbers. And what they found was they switched from an opt-in to an opt-out because the local schools were finding that this was more successful that way, and that there was the high level of buy-in. What they found of the kids was the kids who participated, obviously more kids were being identified, but kids who didn't necessarily go to treatment were also reporting lower and lower feelings of anxiety, depression, suicidality, and substance abuse over time, because they found, and this is more anecdotal, that there was an outlet then for them to start to express those feelings. So you can imagine Montana, right? It's the rough West. It's the ranching group. The reason why I was drawn to it was because this program had gained traction and support there. So in Waukesha, we set up to do a pilot, which they did at the beginning of this school year at their at-risk school to try to see what it would look like to administer it. I'm obviously no longer there, but I've stayed in contact with the Montana group and then with the Merit group out of Madison. So we're bringing that forward to you tonight, just as a discussion point, something that we're going to continue to talk about. We haven't entered into any agreements with them, something that we want to continue to bring you some information on. The real eye-opener for this, though, for me this year, and it created some sense of urgency in me. If you remember back about 2 months ago, there was a school shooting down in Iowa. And the student who did the shooting, well, I think it was 4 people died, principal, student, and then there were a number of others, obviously, who were traumatized and injured in the situation. The thing that really stood out to me, though, was the kid had reported, or his friends had reported a history of bullying. The friends had reported that the kid, or after the fact, had shared that the kid had a history of struggles with mental health. And the thing that kind of rang a bell for me was, I never really thought about this in the realm of school safety. But if you have this thing in place in middle schools and high schools, and you start to catch kids earlier and earlier, especially the kids that are otherwise flying under the radar, how many of these types of events do you potentially prevent from happening? And there's no real way to quantify that. But there is that step that can be in place to help catch kids that parents are like, I'm worried about my son Joe. Like, he's acting different right now. I don't necessarily know where to go. If we have that cycle of screening once, twice a year in place, we know that these things can be found, identified. And the nice thing about this is school staff are not involved in this. This isn't something that the teachers are doing. This isn't something that the principals are maintaining or administering. It's something that goes from the screening, which is in the classroom, with the school counselor, right to a treatment setting. And then it becomes a record that the parent controls, and the decision-making then goes to the parents. And all we've done then is open ourselves up as the location by where this is happening. I have a lot of criticisms of programs that take all of this responsibility and put it in the laps of teachers. Teachers aren't necessarily trained to do this. They want to help kids, but this isn't necessarily their realm to do it. That's why I think that this program is taking some stronghold there. They're working in districts that have 50 kids. They're working in, I believe it was the Helena Public Schools that has over 5,000. So they're familiar with both very, very small, very, very large, urban and rural on Montana standards. So I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but would like to continue this discussion going forward. We see it both valuable on the mental health end, but then also as a measure to help us with school safety down the road.
Greg?
Doctor, so every kid in the district would take it, starting at what age, ballpark?
So we would open it up, and I emphasize open it up to students at the middle and high school level. So right now that would be Parkview and MHS grades 7 through 12. In order to participate and understand these questions, they've determined that 12 years old, 6th grade is the youngest that you would be able to actively participate in this screening.
So full disclosure, like parents would be able to see the questions, and then it would be an opt-in.
Parents would be able to opt in. The questionnaire is electronic, so if parents were interested in seeing what was being answered, we would do some information nights where dummy accounts would be out there, and people would be able to take a look at what the questions were. If there's interest as we have this among the board, I'll have the folks from Merit and the folks from Montana here at a meeting, and then you will be able to participate in the screener. You'll be able to see the report that is generated for both the professional who would see the student, but then also the parent report, where they would get everything that the person had. It would identify what the areas of risk are, and then, again, the resources that would be associated with it.
I'd like
Crosby?
to volunteer to go to Montana for the site visit.
Well, if we'll organize.
I volunteered already, actually.
Crosby?
I think you said this was app-based, correct?
Correct.
So would students have access to this at all times where they could start self-reporting, or is this something that's going to be done on a scheduled basis?
We would start it on a scheduled basis. Where Montana has gotten in some of the school districts where the partnership has been going on for a while is that anytime there was a situation of need, that the thing could be opened up. The issue with doing it, say, 24/7 is we want to have people in place when we get a high risk. We want that child to be able to be seen immediately. Okay. And that's what the school-based setting does. They look at how many providers are available. They can generate approximately how many students you would be able to screen that day, and then they would know based off of the amount of support how many kids that they could kind of predict seeing based off of a screening of, say, 50 kids or 100 kids.
Okay. So is this something that Christine could follow as they go through school? I mean, if it's a moderate threat as a 7th grader, And then, and then maybe follow this moderate threat student along the way? I mean, is
So
it,
we would have, from a tracking standpoint, a
Yeah.
longitudinal tracking standpoint, we'd have the system locked down pretty tight. So what we'd be looking at is just percentages based off of grade level. If we got more and more comfortable with the system, if the board got more comfortable with it, as parents got more comfortable with it, we then could do longitudinal tracking of individual students. They're currently doing that in Montana right now. But I wouldn't recommend we start in that position. I would recommend we start in a position as, I guess, as restrictive as possible and, as in direct communication with the parent. I don't want to maintain those records as they become a health record. So if my mom wanted me to be screened, the record gets turned over to my mom, and she can decide if she wants the record destroyed. Or if I'm an adult student, I could decide if the record was destroyed or not. But the key to this is the screening of students and then getting them into care, not necessarily screening and not knowing what to do. There's we have a survey, the YRBS, that we do. It gives us good information, but it gives us good information for the entire year across an entire class. It doesn't necessarily say this individual student needs help. And the RBHI model really takes a student who needs help, gets them help, and then gets the parents the resources that they need going forward to support that child.
Erica?
So Christine brought us a screener, a mental health screener, a year and a half ago, maybe? It wasn't all that long ago. This sounds a bit different in that I think that one that was proposed, maybe more teachers had to help manage that, where this doesn't sound that way. But I guess what I'm wondering is, this sounds very one-sided data point, whereas the one that Christina had brought us, was multiple data points, and it kind of painted a whole picture, like with attendance, with write-ups, with all of the, trying to get a full picture to help prevent these things. And I think as a board, we decided that we didn't like the idea. I think primarily because maybe staff had to manage it, or we were concerned about records. So what would make this more effective if it's just data points just from the students without any additional daily data?
So I think the benefit from the get-go is for the kids who participate, we will know who is high risk and moderate risk right away, and we'll be able to position them to get treatment within 72 hours and get the parents the resources that they need to follow up on that treatment. I think that that's the absolute immediate benefit to it. And that's if you get 10 kids to participate, or if you get 100 kids to participate, or you have 1,000 kids participate, you immediately begin to make that contact. Another benefit is it puts it in the hands of the parents and the mental health provider. As a parent, I have my concerns about my kids. I think that the average concerns that parents have, every once in a while, you deal with changes in kids' lives, puberty, whatever it might be. You're like, is everything going on okay? What this does is it allows us to say, all right, is this just typical age and development that the kid is experiencing, or are we starting to see something a little bit more significant? Again, the school is the location. The screener is this Merit Solutions model. And then the pathway to treatment is immediate if we need the immediate treatment. It is not necessarily predictive in nature. So when you do whole things, and you start to look at all the at-risk factors such as attendance, office discipline referrals, grades and everything like that, you're able to put together, I think, a profile that would say, all right, maybe right now we're not as concerned, but if this attendance keeps going up, and Christine, you can jump in if you want to, but there was a dues system at the state that very much looked at that said, based off of these factors, this child will be at risk by the time they're in high school. This doesn't do that. This is kind of taking the kid for where they're at, grades, in our case, 7 through 12, 6 through 12, and it says, all right, you are where you are. We just want to make sure we can get you the help that you need. And again, there was a couple things that really jumped out when I listened to them the first time and had conversations. The fact that every time they do a screening, they find that one kid that nobody suspected. Maybe they're the captain of the football team, the president of the student council. They seem to have everything going well for them. This screening process has identified that student as somebody who needs help, and that help and that intervention is coming timely so that student can kind of turn things around and get moving forward. The other part of it is, and I said, within the last couple of months, the number of situations where we've had with school violence in our country, there's always the underlying factor. We hear about it, right? It's the child was suffering from mental illness. There was a level of bullying, right? This is a way for us then, to catch that and get that child the treatment that they need and in contact with the resources. Again, it's not the school district. It's going to be the parent as the follow-up person on it. We're not demanding it, but we're creating the pathway for them. And You know, Christine will continue to present on Care Solace. I think you have that in your presentation tonight, but we're a month into Care Solace, and the numbers that we're seeing as far as communications with them are staggering numbers. I mean, over 1,000 in a month's period of time. So we know that there's a need out there. If we can help create that channel, I think that's the benefit of this.
Jerry?
So, if I understand, the kids, first you opt in, and then the test is given by someone that's not a school, the school psychologist.
School psych counselor or social worker would be the staff that we would tap. All of them have a background in mental health and helping students in that realm. We wouldn't be asking classroom teachers to do that.
Okay, so then the kids take the assessment.
Yep.
And the results go to the parent. We never see them.
The results would go to an on-site coordinator. So for instance, if Christine were the staff member, Christine is at school, she's getting the report, and then she's passing that report to the therapists that are on site to help the student. And those would be only the high-risk students and the moderate-risk students.
So would the parents know before the kids, before that on-site person knew?
Yes, they would. The parents would be notified and say, this was the assessment, this was the result.
By whom would they be contacted?
They'd be contacted by the school staff member or the licensed provider on site, depending on how we wanted to set that up. There are school districts doing both.
And then after the parent says, yes, I want them to be seen, then the on-site person would get the information?
Then they would get the information, or they'd be the one who called, again, depending on how we wanted to set that up. And then the parent would be brought in as part of that initial meeting with the student.
So if the parent got the information that said their students had an issue, they could say, thank you for letting me know, but we don't want the school to know.
Correct. We don't. Well, they could say we don't want the services.
Okay, but would the school know?
The person, the on-site coordinator, would know what the result was, yes.
By person, so they would have a name.
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right, thanks.
Okay.
All right, thank you. My next presentation tonight is just to go over our behavioral threat assessment and management in schools. So I did put a presentation in board docs, but I'm spinning over here, so you guys probably are still spinning too. So just wanted to talk a little bit about what a threat assessment is and what that looks like inside of our school district when we have a reported threat or an incident of concern. And so a problem-solving approach is really what a threat assessment is to prevent violence. It involves an assessment and then interventions with students who have demonstrated any type of concern. A goal of a threat assessment is really to prevent, intervene, and educate the students in our schools. So we do have a school board policy and procedure outlined in 8410 in case you're ever looking for just the actual policy for it. It provides the authority to act on any reported behavior that we have. Part of that policy and procedure is our responsibility to keep a well-trained team of professionals, generally student support, student services staff, and our administrators that are trained in the threat assessment policy and procedures. I like the threat assessment policy and procedure also creates an integrated approach between our police system and our school system. And so that partnership is super important. In addition to that, it also includes, and I've talked about this before, but I'll talk about it a little bit more tonight, about the Speak Up, Speak Out app. That is also a part of the Department of Justice and the work that they do in aligning threat assessments and procedures. And then it also has a very defined process for us to follow that is, again, outlined in policy and then outlined in the training that we go through. So what does a threat look like in our schools? It could be a social media post that somebody puts out there, could be a note, could be a comment overheard by a peer. These are examples, not all inclusive. Statement made by a student, sometimes if a student writes in an English class, and it could be an anonymous tip. So we will see anything from a very small, I would say kind of flippant to like, I'm gonna push you on a stair or something like that, all the way up to like something pretty significant. So we see a pretty wide spectrum. And it's not really, so we conduct a number of low-level threat assessments throughout the school year. When we have something that would be more broad, that would have a broader impact, that's when you see the school system start to communicate with our families and of course with the board. So I just kind of want to talk you through the process of what happens when we receive a threat. So a school team convenes, that's always led by our building administration, and then district offices contacted, and we have Officer Steinbrenner and Officer Pettit also on site. So we have that information gathered. We do interviews that are conducted to the student, the people who might be the target or the targeted audience. And we do interviews with staff members and parents. And then we get together as a team, we look at that information, and then the threat assessment procedure has 3 phases. So there's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Craig, you have a really lost look on your face. I just gotta pause. Do you have questions so far? Okay.
Makes you sad, really.
Yeah, I know. So it does have 3 phases. So we always do phase 1 of a threat assessment. That's just our gathering of information and those initial interviews. And then we always do, after at the end of phase 1, then we determine if we need to move into phases 2 and 3. And we look at those steps as a team. I think the most important thing about a threat assessment is that it's never done by one solo person. It is always a team of people. And that's really important that you have multiple perspectives on a team. So I just put in the slides that look at phases 1 and 2. Again, I kind of outlined some of these things, but again, looking at who are the witnesses are, who are people that have observed the behavior, if we've had teachers that we've talked to. We talk about the SRO, we'll talk about does a student have access to weapons at home? And then what is the level of concern? Again, we'll always talk about that towards the midway through our threat assessment about do we feel like this is a low level concern, a medium level concern, or a high level concern. We continue to go through, these are additional pieces to that threat assessment. So we look at, after we've documented all of those interviews, after we've gathered all the information, we look at observations, we look at risk factors, and then again, talk about that classification. I think it's also important just to look at, yes, we have the process, but there's also bigger things that we also have to consider at times. So it may be digging into educational records if a student has come to us from another district that might have some history or some behavioral issues or concerns that we didn't know about before, so we might be looking at that. We might be looking into social media or digital information that's out there, lockers, notebooks, cars, all of those types of things that might be on campus and or could be in somebody's home. We're always looking into that mental health piece, talking with the school staff, working with families, and then also talking about those, that group of individuals or student target that would be involved in this particular situation too. So this is just a kind of a pathway I just wanted to talk through. When we're doing a threat assessment and when we go through training through the Department of Justice, there's this pathway of 6 different steps. So the first one would really be that those blue areas, the personal grievance, where we might, a student may have an issue, a personal issue with somebody or a situation. And then that second step really being like that ideation, what would happen if I could do this, you know, what would that outcome be? And then really as you get into those last 4, those are things that are obviously would heighten our concern when we're researching or planning, preparing, and then that probing and breaching is really when they're able to access a building and then ultimately the attack that would happen in one of our schools. So the Speak Up, Speak Out app, I know I brought this to you in December of 2019 when we introduced it, but we do average about 53 tips per year. So right now we've had 166 tips to date since we launched the Speak Up, Speak Out app. And again, that's done through the Department of Justice and there is no cost to us. It has been a great, one of the best things I've seen come out in a long time. It gives parents, community members, and students an opportunity to anonymously put in a tip. It can, and I put as many things on there as I felt appropriate, but there is a really vast array of things that people put in tips for that are they're concerned about a student, they're concerned about a situation, and they're able to anonymously put it in there. The thing that's also nice about the SUSO app is that It is manned 24/7, so there's always a trained person on the other side of the application. They can go back and forth with the tipster, so if somebody writes it and says there is a planned fight coming up, then that person receiving the tip can say, do you know where this might happen? What is the, location? Do you have any more information? It's up to the tipster if they want to engage in that conversation, but it is an option to engage in that conversation. And then the police will send, the person monitoring the app will send the police when it's warranted. So say it's 2 o'clock in the morning and somebody is suicidal, that's the report. The police, like in this case, Waukesha County Dispatch would send an officer over to the house to make sure that the student is okay. So it is monitored all of the time. The other piece about SUSO also is that you can upload images from social media. So if there is some type of bullying happen or there's a post that's concerning, a student or a family can upload those images right into the SUSO app, and then as administrators you can see those. And then as Joe alluded to, since we've started with Care Solace, we have had, this is what the dashboard looks like when I go into Care Solace, but I did want to give you some more recent numbers. I actually pulled this off on Thursday, but since then the numbers have increased. So when you're looking at the total cases, there's been 31 as of last Thursday to date. Today when I just looked, there's been 33 cases opened by either parents or staff that have referred parents or families into Care Solace to get support. The total communications is the number of contacts, either emails, phone conversations, contacts with providers, insurance companies, parents. There's been 1,220 communications so far. The number of appointments that have been secured are 5. And then the total number of people who are just going on either as a staff member again or as a parent and just looking like, what kind of support can I get? Who are the different providers that I could see? Is this person in my network? There's been 26 of those searches so far. So when you're looking at the treatment that parents and community members and students are looking for, highest ranking is anxiety, and then the lowest would be, I'm sorry, Dale, I had to look around your head. The lowest would be the OCD. And so as of today, actually, I just took a closer look. The anxiety was up over 60%, and then the depression over 40%. And the suicidal risk was over 20%. So just piggybacking on what Joe was saying earlier, these are in fact issues in our community as well. We've also had parents looking for, and I didn't include this on the slide, but we do have parents looking for help with the use of opioids, alcohol, inhalants, and other stimulants. So also something that just mirrors the concerns that we've seen also in some of our students. When we look at the time investment, so this is that circular, that 16.7 hours, that's how much time the staff at Care Solace have put in so far. As of today, that was 23.9 hours. Again, talking with either with our staff, providers, or the clients, which would be our students and families in this case. And you can see that breakdown on the far right. The highest amount of time is the amount of time they're talking with the actual families of people who are contacting Care Solace. And I think that's relevant if you're looking at the top 10 insurances. And I think this is just interesting because when we ask our student services staff to try to make contacts for home, and they really want to do everything they can to get parents the support they need, the sheer number of healthcare options that are out there make this particular piece really difficult, and why Care Solace has been super helpful in that. It's really challenging for one of our staff members to call and say any number of these 10 different options of insurance and say, well, do you accept this insurance? Okay, you don't, I'll try another provider. Where Care Solace is taking this, and they're taking the lead on all of that. So our staff members are not having to do that. So the efficiency has been really a big time savings for our staff. So just in summary, just to kind of go over the slides, we do have good policies and processes in place to address concerning behaviors in our school. We continue to cycle our administration and staff through what's called threat assessment training. Again, that is put on through the Department of Justice. We just had a team go through on January 29th. There was a training offered over in Greendale, and we had a good-sized team there. We continue to do tabletop activities during our admin council meetings to norm our behavioral responses as a district. We do have the anonymous reporting app in place. Again, I am super grateful that we have that. There's always different means for people to put in tips, but this is a good anonymous option for our families and students. And then Care Solace has just been a really great resource so far, and we are just really only a month in. And so I'm feeling really good about where we are right now. And I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm super proud of our administration and our student services staff, because when something comes into our schools, they need to stop what they're doing and address to make sure that the safety and concern of all of our students and the welfare of our buildings is top priority. And we have some exceptional student services staff and administration who does that. Do you guys have any questions for me? Terry?
You were talking, you said that these numbers were from last Thursday, and then you were giving us the current numbers.
Correct.
And some of them changed dramatically. Like,
Mhm.
is that how quickly they go up all year? Like, by the end of the year, will the number be for total communications 3,000? Because you went from 938 to 1,200 something.
Joe's shaking his head yes. I know that they've had it in other districts, and those districts did see that growth.
So the more and more connected that our parents become to Care Solace, you'll see those communications that amount of time go up substantially. The one thing that I can say, Care Solace works relentlessly to get you connected to a partner. I've been made aware of families who have reached out, had the initial contact, and Care Solace gets the person in place or they need some information. They don't just call you once every few days. They call you once almost every few hours because they know the importance, they know where we're at in that initial intake, and they really work with the family to get the family into the care. The other part of that is, a lot of the work that the board does, you don't see the initial impact of that. When the board approved this and when we had this up and running, it was within the first couple of weeks. We were in the hundreds of contacts already had made and the hundreds of communications. And to monitor that and to monitor the immediate impact that this has had, it seems like it's kind of a simple vote. From a budgetary standpoint, this isn't one of those budget breakers, but from an impact thing, what you approved is already helping our families and our kids. So thank you very much for that.
Jake?
Just out of curiosity, so the contract that we have, I'm sure there were some.
Jake, speaking to Mike, please.
I'm sure there were some assumptions that were made in terms of, I don't know if it was like student population or for pricing, right? There had to be some assumptions that were made in terms of.
It's based off of district size. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so student population.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering how we were tracking compared to those assumptions so far. I know it's early.
I would say, month by month.
If it was population, it's irrelevant then.
Right. I have, again, one district's perspective on this, and a district that was 3 times our size in a month was usually doing between 2,000 and 3,000 communications a month. That would ramp up usually in March, but to about 4,000. So, as we're tracking, we're seeing, I guess, similar benefit to what a larger school system was seeing on a month-by-month basis. And again, we're just starting with this. It's still in its infancy in our system.
Thank you.
Erica?
So I guess I'm just looking for, if you could describe the differences between Care Solace and what we just talked about, the Rural Behavioral Health Institute. So this is a resource that our counselors give to families in need when something happens in school. Or do they come to us looking for help unsolicited?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
Both. So it might be, we have the brochures and I had cards made with all of their contact information. Some parents or staff members might just take the information and do with it as they wish. That's the anonymous piece of it. Or they could be struggling and a staff member might say, hey, why don't you check this out? Or I know you've had a hard time matching up with somebody who's really going to meet the needs of your child. So, here's an option to work through. Or we have parents who work full-time and it's really hard to get into somebody or to get somebody to answer the phone and get a phone call back all within like a half-hour lunch period, right? So they're doing a lot of that work for you, Care Solace is. So Care Solace is going to provide you the therapy, the connection. The Merit Solutions is a screener, and so Joe is able to talk more about that. But there is a difference between those two pieces.
So how well will these two work together if we were to go that way?
Yeah, they work very well together. So Care Solace is not operated as like an on-site provider during a screening, but they're a great resource for families to get connected to if there's a need identified. The screener that we had talked about is there to identify if there's a problem or there's not a problem, and to what degree does that problem exist. But it won't provide the treatment piece. The treatment piece, the initial treatment piece, the emergency meeting, the appointment that you have, that initial one is done to come up with a safety plan to start the process for the family. And right after that then would be where Care Solace would begin to help out. So as actually Merit reached out to me to put Merit in contact with the Care Solace rep, and they're already talking about like how could they partner together to get into areas that the RBHI wouldn't have access to. So, for instance, in larger urban areas where you just wouldn't be able to get in and do the screening, or an area, for instance, that like the Montana group just wouldn't feel like they have enough expertise background in. The Care Solace and Merit are now having the discussion as to how can they get that screening and care in place to areas that are outside of Montana's reach.
But it's all opt-in, both of them.
Correct. You don't have to.
So it's hard to know how much it would actually increase or spread our reach if it's opt-in. I'm not saying it shouldn't be opt-in. I'm just trying to think like how much more are we going to reach with this if we sort of have something in place which is also opt-in by parents, right? Like if we're putting this in the hands of parents and we're making tools available, is an additional tool that is still opt-in going to expand our reach?
Yeah, so, and when, as we proceed forward with this, you'll be able to get a chance to take the screener or take the assessments for anxiety, depression, suicidality, and your substance abuse. Answer them however you want to, but you'll see the level of detailed report. That's the same thing that you would take if you went to a mental health provider and they thought that you had a suicidal tendency. They would take you through that screener. It's the same screener that you would be using. So to that degree, for the number of kids that participate, right, it's what you're finding is the kid who is unknown, or the kid where, and I'll look at my own family. My wife and I are both very busy, right? Like how much stuff do you miss that the kid is otherwise going to divulge when they have, their phone or their computer in front of them and they're just answering the questions, right? There's an importance to that, to the anonymous administrator of the instrument, the computer, where the kid can be honest with that and interface with that honestly, and then get them that appointment right away. Where Care Solace is good is I noticing my kid is doing this. I talk to my child and they're cutting right now. I can reach out to Care Solace and I can say this is the issue. My child told me that they want to commit suicide. I can call Care Solace and we can approach it that way after we do the initial emergency response to that. So, there's a layer, I guess, for both. One is going to rely on adults actually knowing. The other one is going to help us identify if there are unknowns out there that need help, and we can provide that.
Assuming parents opt in.
Correct, if parents opt in. The other option to take, and a lot of school districts have done this, they've started opt-in, and then they've gone to opt-out because of the value that it's provided. And you start to get that one family that comes forward with a story like, I didn't know, and we got help, and now everything is much better. And we learned so much through the process. And those narratives, as was shared to me by the folks from Montana, were the things that really got the school boards to understand the benefit of it, right? I mean, you can imagine a lot of school boards, they have their individuals, Montana in particular, a lot of them have been identified like ranchers, hunters, outfitters, so on and so forth, that are active in their school boards, that not necessarily a topic that they want to discuss, like the feelings, the mental health piece, all of that. But what they found is in the private conversations, nobody was identified by name, but in the private conversations, they wanted their son or daughter to get help. They just didn't know what steps were there, and they honestly didn't even know what the problem was, or they themselves suffered from it when they were young, and they didn't have a way to talk about it, and they don't want their kids to have that same experience. So all of that, we can bring that information forward. We can bring some of those stories forward as we have future conversations.
Any other questions?
Sherry?
So, does it, the SUSO,
Mhm.
speak up, that one, lots of people in our area use, right?
Yes.
Where this other one is currently not quite as often used or in the
Well,
area?
Care Solace or the other one, the
The other
Montana one? The other one, yeah, the other one, the only district locally that has done a pilot with it was Waukesha.
The other thing about Care Solace that I just wanted to point out too before I forget is that Care Solace is also available to staff. So on our dashboard, like when I go into the dashboard, I can see that our staff are also accessing Care Solace. I can't see who, I don't know why, but I can see that our staff are taking advantage and using the resource as well. Any other questions?
I do not see any. Thank you.
All right, thank
I
you.
just want to thank Dr. Cook, Christine, and your team for when these threats come in, when they're posted, and just the speed and the thorough investigations you guys do, and the transparency of getting out there to the community. So thank you. All right, moving on to finance and facilities.
All right, I'm going to do my best Tom Karthauser this evening. So
Just
this evening,
quicker.
yep, I will
Same haircut.
get us through this. Yeah.
I wasn't gonna say it.
We don't have a high barber bill in our office, at least out of me and Tom. So the first thing we have tonight is our audit report. We have Amber with us, our auditor, and she's going to go through the report. She's participating virtually, and Stephanie is getting her on right now.
Tom's not here when we do an audit.
Welcome, Amber.
Hi, Amber.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Ebert, and I'm from Hawkins Ash CPAs, and I will be going over the 2023 financial statements. I'm just going to be flipping through the financial statements, so feel free to flip along with me. We'll start on pages 3 through 5. This is the independent auditor's report. The first two paragraphs are probably the most important part. It just mentions that we issued a clean audit opinion, which is the best opinion that can be achieved. On page 4, the bullet points, this just kind of goes through what our audit procedures are. Next are pages 6 through 14. This is the management's discussion and analysis. So just kind of a broad overview of the whole financial from management's perspective. Page 15. Oh, sorry.
That works.
We just fixed our audio.
Okay. Page 15 is the statement of net position. This just goes over the WRS amounts, which for the current year is funded at 95.72%. It also goes over, it also shows the OPEB pension, which is fully funded, OPEB healthcare, the capital assets, and the debt amounts. Page 16 is the statement of activities. This just shows the overall expenses with the items I mentioned just previously, and then the charges for services column, which would be your typical everyday revenue, and then the operating grants and contributions. This would be any grants that the district gets, or donations, or anything related to that. Pages 17 through 18 are the fund financial statements for the general fund and other major funds. This year, the fund balance compared to current year of expenses is sitting at 31.6%, which is very good. Most of our districts range from 15 to 35%, so you're right in the middle of that, which is great to see. And then the largest expense category is the instruction category, which sits at about 54.4% of total expenses. And most of our districts range from 54 to 63% for that. So again, right in the middle of that. Page 19 is just a reconciliation of change in fund balance to the change in net assets. Pages 20 through 21 just show the fiduciary fund for the employee benefit. Next are all of the notes. So pages 22 through 47 just go through all the notes. I'll just hit on a few of them. So on page 29, this is where the capital assets start. This year there were about 698,000 in total assets added and about 213,000 disposed. Page 30 at the top, this is new this year. This is the, hello? Okay. This is the SBITA information, which is the subscription-based information technology arrangements. This is due to GASB 96, which was implemented this year. So it basically just, we had to add anything that was material that is a long-term contract related to any IT things. So for example would be the online books that the district purchases. So that just kind of shows overall, we amortize that over the life. And yeah, that'll probably be there to stay for a while. And probably will be comparable year to year on the amount that's in the SBITA assets row. Pages 30 through 31 go over the long-term obligations. So this year there were no new debt, but however, WRS is now a liability, which is the 9.7 million in that chart on page 30. This is nothing to do with the district. It simply just depends on how WRS is doing for the year. And unfortunately this year they had a liability, but the last couple of years it was an asset. And then page 31, right in the middle, it just shows the long-term debt schedule through 2033 and when the current debt is expected to be paid off. Pages 31 through 37 just goes through the WRS footnote. This is all boilerplate language. We're required to report the way WRS wants. So I would say 99% of it is WRS, and then we just tweak the numbers based on the district. Pages 37 through 40 is the OPEB supplemental pension footnote. Again, pretty typical boilerplate with just tweaking as needed. Page 40 at the bottom just goes through all of the interfund balances, so transferring money from one fund to another. Page 41 through 45 goes over the OPEB healthcare, and again, this is boiler template, and we just tweak and add the dollar amounts that are related to the district. Page 45, right in the middle, goes through the fund balances in that position more specifically, so you can see what each fund balance is restricted for. And then page 46 through 47 is the self-funded insurance footnote. And then page 48, this goes over the original and final budgeted versus actual amounts. So this year, the total expenditures spent were about 1.6 million less than budgeted, and the total revenues received were about almost 1 million more than budgeted. Pages 50 through 52 are WRS footnotes. Again, this is just boilerplate, the required schedules that WRS would like us to report. 53 is the supplemental pension benefit. Again, just a standard report that we're required to show. And then 54 is the OPEB healthcare schedule. 55 through 56 goes over the non-major funds, which was also reported on the pages 17 through 18 in the non-major fund column. Page 58 shows the federal expenditures that were received. So this year, the district received about $6 million in federal awards and spent about $4.9 million of it. Page 59 goes over the state grants that were received. So this year, the district received about $34 million in state grants and spent about just slightly under what was received, sitting at $34 million as well. And then lastly, pages 66 through 67 just goes over our findings. The only one at same as several prior years is just the preparation of financial statements. And then 68 just goes over the summary for reporting the prior year findings and the corrective action plan. Any questions?
No questions.
Perfect. I just would like to thank you on behalf of Hawkins Ash for allowing us to be your auditor again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to territory, oh, we did the territory detachment. Moving on to actuarial valuation.
Yeah, so I'm going to go off my notes with Tom, and then I'll speak the best I can on a number of these. The actual came in, again, that we are at, I think the report was 99.5% funded on our post-retirement benefit. So we had to have the post-retirement benefit audited and looked at as far as what is our ability to continue to fund it. And we're at 99.5%. We heard that from our auditor in the last presentation, but again, this is a really good position for us to be in. Any questions on that? We will again have these up for approval and can have them at the regular board meeting if you have more detailed questions for Tom.
Referendum update.
The referendum update. So we are on the speaking tour this year. We have, up until this point, up until last Friday, we had done 7 formal face-to-face. We had been to the villages of Big Bend, Vernon, North Prairie, the village of Mukwonago for all face-to-face. Tonight, Tom is at the town of Ottawa for a face-to-face. We have everybody on the books with the exception of the town of Waukesha. I'm sorry, the town of Mukwonago. I apologize. Town of Mukwonago was not able to get us scheduled to come in and do a presentation. We are also presenting to PTOs across the district. We've taken a couple of what I would call just informal one-offs. Tom's had the opportunity to present to some of the athletic groups at the FOMA event this past weekend. We spoke there, had an opportunity to speak at the Baptist Church in town a week and a half ago, I believe it was. All had a good opportunity. The project thus far has been very well received. We've had very good questions on it, and we've had a number of people reach out just with questions or support for where we're at from a project standpoint. We have about 25 more scheduled presentations coming up over the next couple of weeks. This week, every evening this week, we're going to be somewhere Friday morning. Lynch has invited us in to do a presentation there. So we really appreciate all of the groups in town, their willingness to come in, the questions, allow us to come in, and then the questions that they have for us. Our website is up to date, so if you go to the district webpage and pull up referendum, you'll be able to see the information in the presentations. You'll be able to see the tax calculator on there should people have questions about the impact on their home. Again, $69 per thousand. Per 100,000 on the home. So you can go in there, punch the numbers in, and get an estimate as to how much it's going to cost you on your taxes. And then last week we did a voiceover presentation, taking anybody who goes to the website, for instance, if they can't make it to one of our face-to-face presentations, they'll be able to get the overview of the project. They'll also be able to skip through different pieces of it because Somebody might not want to listen to the whole spiel, but they just want to know, for instance, how much it's going to hit their taxes. So that'll be coming up within the next week or so. We have 3 formal presentations at Parkview coming up, February 21st, March 4th, March 13th, all at 6:30 p.m. in the evening.
Any questions on the referendum?
Are these well attended?
We get a mix. Sometimes we're presenting to 5 or 6 people. We are hopeful that when we present to the municipalities that have the meeting being played, that people will either watch it live or watch the presentation. So we're hoping that our outreach is broader there. We have had a couple of events though that have been very well attended. 50, 60 people in attendance, and again, had an opportunity for their questions. So.
Jerry?
Are you gonna be doing signs? I know the last time we had referendum, there were signs.
The yard signs?
Yeah.
We're in discussion as to, is it needed, is it not needed, right now. So that's part of the ongoing discussion. We've had the boards. We're doing a lot more direct mailing than we have in the past. And again, opening ourselves up that way. We are gonna be doing some, banners, on all of our school properties facing the roads, so that people who go by can see the banner attached to the fence, so that they can get information on the referendum that way. But we haven't yet decided if yard signs are going to be part of it.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to 23-24 budget update.
Yeah, so Tom has presented in the packet the budget, where we're at. Based off of his words, the actual budget is in line with our proposed budget. Fund 10 salaries are running a little bit ahead. Fund 10 benefits are running a little bit behind, as is Fund 27. So he had no concerns at this time about the budget.
Okay.
And if he's not concerned, I'm also not concerned. This is
Any
his
questions? Okay. Roof replacement update.
So we have Andy Wegner is here tonight. We do have the roof RFP. We've been working with Interstate Roofing Consultants for over 10 years on this. Just what is our replacement cycle? We did a RFP. The bid was awarded to Nations Roofing. The budget for this has always been part of the Fund 41, Fund 46 budget, and has always been approved. This work has always been approved in the 10-year capital maintenance project. In March, we'll be bringing back the 10-year plan for the board with an update as to where we are at with Clarendon's roof. So the priority is for MHS roofing. That's the first one. That was the level of highest need. And then Clarendon is next up on the list for roof work.
Vito's been waiting all night for this.
And if anybody has questions, Andy's here, he can jump in.
I just want to know how big it is.
How big is the roof that we're doing?
Yeah.
Equating to, if you can look at it, the center of the building at MHS that has a vaulted aluminum coat roof, and then the roof over the north gym as well.
Do you know how many square feet?
You were gonna pull me up on that one. I'll have to get that to you, Vito.
Gotcha. Roofs are expensive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
I'm kidding. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
Oh, Bertie. Moving on to action items, hires, retirements, and resignations.
All right, we did not offer any contracts this month, but we did have some resignations. Cheryl Frost, an interventionist at Big Bend. Elise Petz, a culinary arts teacher at the high school. Jackie Pilon, a grade 5 teacher at Big Bend Elementary. Jessie Spate, a physical education teacher at Parkview and Eagleville. And Allison Wearsbecky at Mukwonago High School, a science teacher.
I'll make a motion that we approve the resignations.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any comments or questions?
So all of these are effective in March, not the end of the year.
Nope, so Jackie Pilon is effective on June 7th. Jessie Spate was effective immediately. So she has already, or she is, as soon as the board approves, would resign, and then the rest of them are March.
Okay, so they're not the end of the year. So what do we do for teachers in these classrooms for the rest of the year? Usually they're the end of the year.
So we would work with our building principals to post for long-term subs and fill those positions with a substitute until the duration of the year.
So were they under contract till the end of the year?
They were under contract.
And so how is that handled?
So we, in their contract, if they break their contract before the end of the year, they pay liquidated damages, and we assess what that looks like based on the situation. If they break their contract prior to, during the school year, we can charge them up to $6,000 in liquidated damages.
Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor for the hires, retirements, and resignations, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes.
I'd just like to note I abstained because I don't know what to think of this yet.
Okay. All right, up next, we're going to go into executive session. According to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, we are going to be discussing post-retirement benefits related to a specific district employee. But I will make note, we will not be reconvening into open session. So if you're going to wait for that, we will not be going back to open session. All right, Sherry, do a roll call, please.
Could you repeat what you just said about not going into open session?
We are not going to be going back into open session after. There's no need to. Will be updated in executive session.
Crosby Bruggenhagen?
Yes.
Erica Connor?
Yes.
Jake Hilgenthal?
Yes.
Gail Lesage?
Yes.
Dale Parter?
Yes.
Vito Schwartz?
Yep.
Carolyn Simon?
Yes.
Craig Verts?
Here.
Jerry Winchowski here.